Imagine it's Sunday morning. The sun is hitting the floor of your living room. You've got a fresh cup of coffee, and for the first time in a long time, you feel peace. No bells ringing, no heavy incense clogging your lungs, and most importantly, no judgmental stares from a woman in a floral headscarf who thinks your skirt is 2 inches too short. You look out the window and think, God is out there. God is in this coffee. God is in my soul. Why on earth would I go to a cold, dark building to find him? If you've felt that, you're not alone. In fact, you're part of the fastest growing religion in the world. People who are spiritual, but not religious. Because let's be honest, the religious part, it's looking pretty rotten lately. We've all seen it. We see the headlines about corruption, the priests driving Mercedes-Benzes while their parishioners struggle to pay rent, and the stifling ancient rules that feel like they were written for a world that died 1,000 years ago. Why would anyone in 2026 voluntarily walk into a place that feels like a museum of hypocrisy? The most common argument I hear, and the one I lived by for years, is that God is too big for a building. If God is the creator of the universe, the architect of the stars, and the breath of life itself, then why does he need a specific GPS coordinate? Why does he need a middleman in a black robe to tell me how to talk to him? We've been told that the kingdom of God is within us. If that's true, then my bedroom is a cathedral, the forest is a temple, the ocean is my liturgy. When I'm hiking or listening to music that moves my soul, I feel a connection to the divine that is 10 times more powerful than sitting through a 3-hour service where I don't even understand half the language. In the modern world, we value authenticity. We want a raw, direct connection with the truth. And the church, it feels like a filter. It feels like a layer of gold leaf and dusty traditions standing between me and the light. We don't need the membership, the tithing, or the dogma. We just need a heart that is open. Or so we think. Let's talk about the human element, the part that usually turns people away for good. We've all heard the stories, or maybe we've seen it ourselves. You walk into a church, and instead of being met with the unconditional love they preach, you're met with a wall of the church ladies. You know the ones, the self-appointed guardians of the pews, who look at your tattoos, your hair, or your vibe, and immediately decide you don't belong. And then there's the leadership. It's hard to listen to a sermon about poverty of spirit and giving to the poor when the person delivering it is wearing a watch that costs more than your car and retreats to a luxury villa after the service. It feels like a business. It feels like an ancient corporation that has mastered the art of selling guilt and salvation to keep the lights on and the luxury cars running. When you see that kind of rot at the top, it taints everything else. It makes the incense smell like a cover-up. It makes the beautiful icons look like expensive wallpaper for a sinking ship. You start to realize that if this is the representative of God on earth, then you'd rather just deal with God directly. Finally, there's the law, the no. Don't do this, don't eat that, don't think this way, follow this fast, say these specific words. To the modern mind, this looks like a high control group. It looks like a cult of tradition where your individuality is crushed in favor of a 2,000-year-old script. We live in an era of your truth. We are taught that our personal journey is the most sacred thing we have. So when a church tells us that there is an objective truth and a narrow path, it feels like a cage. Why should I care what a monk in the year 300 AD thought about my lifestyle? Why should I follow a calendar that was designed for Byzantine farmers? It feels irrelevant. It feels like we are clinging to a dead past while the world is moving forward. We want a spirituality that evolves with us. We want a God who understands that it's 2026. We want freedom. And from the outside, the church looks like the opposite of freedom. It looks like a prison made of stone and old books. So we leave. We stay home. We look for God in our souls, in the sunset, and in ourselves. And for a while, it feels great. It feels like we finally broken the chains of religion and found something real. But is it? Or are we just trading a difficult reality for a comfortable illusion? Be honest with me. If you've stopped going to church or never started, what was the last straw for you? Was it the hypocrisy, the rules, or just the feeling that God is better found in the world than in a building? Let me know in the comments. So we've made our exit. We've walked away from the institutional rot, the judgmental grandmas, and the Mercedes priests. We are standing on our metaphorical mountain, breathing in the fresh air of spiritual independence. And for a while, it feels incredible. It feels like a weight has been lifted. You don't have to wake up early on Sundays, you don't have to fast, and you certainly don't have to explain your life choices to a man in a black robe. But here is the terrifying question that started to keep me up at night. If God is only in my soul, and I am the only one interpreting what he is saying, how do I know I'm not just talking to myself? Think about it. In the modern world, we are obsessed with my truth. We treat our intuition like it's an infallible compass. But let's be honest, our intuition is often just a fancy word for our moods, our ego, and our latest cravings. When I'm spiritual but not religious, my God conveniently always agrees with me. My God never tells me to forgive the person who betrayed me. My God never tells me that I'm being selfish or arrogant. My God usually just tells me that I'm doing my best and that I should probably buy those expensive shoes because I deserve it. If your God never disagrees with you, you aren't worshiping God, you're worshiping a reflection of yourself in a very expensive mirror. This is the spiritual echo chamber. We leave the church because we want freedom, but we end up in a room where the only voice we hear is our own, amplified by the algorithm of the self. We become our own pope, our own priest, and our own judge. And that, my friends, is a heavy, lonely burden to carry. Now, let's revisit that judgmental grandma and the hypocritical priest. When we stay home because the church is full of hypocrites, we're making a fundamental category error. We're treating the church like a VIP lounge for the morally superior. We think that if someone is in that building, they should be a finished product, a walking, talking icon of perfection. But that's not what the church is. The church isn't a museum of saints. It is a hospital for the sick. Think about it this way. If you walk into an emergency room and you see people bleeding, coughing, and groaning in pain, do you walk out in a huff and say, "This place is a scam. Look at all these sick people. A real hospital would only have healthy people in it"? Of course not. That would be insane. You realize that the very reason those people are there is because they are broken. The judgmental grandma isn't evidence that the church is a failure. She is evidence that the church is a necessity. She is there because she is struggling with her pride and her narrow-mindedness, just like you're struggling with your ego and I'm struggling with my vanity. When we say, "I don't need the church because the people there are messy," we are essentially saying, "I don't need the hospital because there are germs there." The human element is exactly where the healing happens. When you are spiritual but not religious, you can curate your community. You only hang out with people who think like you, look like you, and vibe with you. But the church forces you to stand next to the person you find annoying, the person who smells of onions, and the person whose politics you hate. And in that friction, in that uncomfortable, messy human proximity, you are forced to actually practice love, not just think about it. You can't learn to love humanity in your bedroom. You learn to love humanity by standing in a 3-hour service next to a person you'd usually avoid in the supermarket. And what about the Mercedes priest? The corruption, the scandals. This is usually the kill shot from most people's faith. And I get it. It's disgusting. It's a betrayal of the highest order. But let's use some cold, hard logic here. If a doctor tells you that you need to stop smoking to save your life, but then you see that same doctor smoking a cigarette behind the clinic, does that make his advice false? No, it makes him a hypocrite, but it doesn't change the fact that the smoke is still killing you. The truth is independent of the person carrying it. If the church is a 2,000-year-old school of healing and some of the teachers are failing the class, that doesn't mean the curriculum is wrong. It means the teachers are humans who have succumbed to the very sickness they were supposed to be treating. When we walk away from the truth because a human failed to live up to it, we aren't punishing the corrupt priest. We are only depriving ourselves of the medicine. The gold and glory of the institution can be a distraction, yes, but if you look past the Mercedes in the parking lot and look at the altar, you'll find something that hasn't changed in 20 centuries. The rot at the top is a tragedy, yes, but the root at the bottom, the sacraments, the prayers, the wisdom, is still pure. Are you going to let a flawed man stand between you and the eternal? Finally, we have to talk about the rules, the fasts, the dogma. We live in a world that tells us that boundaries are bad and limitless choice is good. But if you've ever tried to sail a boat in the middle of a storm with no rudder, you know that limitless choice is just another word for drowning. The rules of orthodoxy aren't there to crush your personality, they're there to protect it. Think of a river. A river is beautiful and powerful because it has banks. The banks restrict the water, yes, but without those banks, the river isn't a river. It's just a big, shallow, stagnant puddle that eventually evaporates. The fasts are spiritual weightlifting. The prayers are a spiritual heartbeat. The dogma is a map of a territory that has already been explored by thousands of people who went before you. Why would I try to find my own way through a deadly wilderness when there is a 2,000-year-old path that is already paved with the blood and sweat of the saints? When we say, I want to be free, we usually mean we want to be slaves to our own desires. True freedom isn't the ability to do whatever you want. It's the power to do what is right, even when you don't feel like it. The cage of the church isn't there to keep you in, it's there to keep the wolves out. It's there to give you a structure so that your soul can actually grow upward instead of just spreading out thin across the floor. So, the God in my soul theory sounds beautiful until you actually try to live it. It's like saying, I have the spirit of medicine in my heart, so I don't need a doctor. It sounds poetic, but it won't fix a broken leg. Here is the cold, hard truth. The internal God is almost always a yes man. Think about the last time you were truly angry. Maybe someone betrayed you or humiliated you. Your internal spirituality told you to protect your peace and cut them out. It validated your pride. But the church looks you in the eye and says, forgive them right now, even if it hurts. That's the difference between a self-help hobby and a transformative faith. One comforts your ego, the other crucifies it. If spirituality is a journey, you need a map that wasn't drawn by you. If you were lost in a deadly forest, would you trust your intuition to find the way out, or would you look for a path carved by thousands of people who survived before you? The God in my soul theory is a forest with no path. It feels like freedom until the sun goes down and you realize you've been walking in circles for years, never getting any closer to the light. Furthermore, we are physical beings. We weren't meant to be floating vibes. If God wanted to stay as a feeling in our souls, he never would have become a man. He wouldn't have touched the lepers, washed feet with real water, or died on a physical wooden cross. The God in my soul approach tries to turn God into a ghost, something we can ignore when it's inconvenient. But the church makes God unavoidable. You have to show up. You have to stand. You have to taste. You have to face the person you don't like in the pew next to you. It's not a philosophy, it's a collision with reality. We live in a world that is obsessed with self-discovery, but the church is about self-denial, and that's exactly why the modern world calls it a cult. Because in a world that wants you to be a consumer, the church wants you to be a saint. In a world that wants you to be a slave to your feelings, the church offers you the tools to be a master of your soul. I didn't join a cult. I escaped one. I left the cult of the self, where the walls are made of mirrors and the God looks exactly like me, to enter the only place where I am allowed to be wrong, allowed to be broken, and finally allowed to be healed.